The Mark Richt era at Georgia is under the microscope. The recruiting rankings versus the results. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down college football like no one else, discussion, debate, and analysis that you will not find anywhere else. Lock it in here. Provide your comments, your feedback, your suggestions, and recommendations for future videos. And, of course, like, comment, share, and subscribe to MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, to continue what we do here for you, the hardcore college football fan. We've had much debate and discussion since Mark Richt took over at Miami, of course, his dismissal at Georgia, then taking over at Miami, which got off to a good start and then plummeted quickly after the 2017 season. So much debate over Mark Richt's era at Georgia and then, of course, at Miami, which can't be much defended considering how it ended here in the past 15 or 20 games at the end of 2017 into 2018. But we are looking at Mark Richt's performance in the recruiting rankings and then translated on the field performance against his chief rivals in the SEC Eastern Division, Tennessee and Florida. So Mark Richt's first season at Georgia was 2001. He coached 15 seasons at Georgia, 2001 through 2015. He missed the bowl game in 2015, but coached the Bulldogs to a 9-3 record in 2015. So we're going to take Mark Richt's first recruiting class in 2002, his first full recruiting cycle in 2002 through that 2015 recruiting cycle that produced that 2015 squad. He recruited extremely well at Georgia. We've seen in the past few years what Kirby Smart has been able to do, which is been up the ante and raised the bar at Georgia. So what Mark Richt has done has certainly been surpassed, at least in a small window, by Kirby Smart, both in the recruiting rankings and on the field, in winning an SEC championship and getting to the national championship game 2 years ago. However, let's keep in mind that Georgia football was underachieving for the 15 to 20 years prior to Mark Richt, and 7-5 and 8-4 type seasons were the norm in Athens before Mark Richt. So let's look at the Georgia recruiting rankings starting in the 2002 recruiting cycle. Number 9, 7, 7, 3, 8, 7, 4, 11, 7, 9, 12, 8, 6. That means that in 15 recruiting cycles, actually that's 14 total recruiting cycles, Georgia only finished outside the top 10 twice under Mark Richt. And those recruiting classes were still very fine recruiting classes at number 11 and number 12. All those recruiting classes finished in the top 10 with an average recruiting ranking during Mark Richt's tenure in Athens of 7.6. All right. How does that compare to Florida? Well, the other teams that were comparing Mark Richt's 15-year tenure at Georgia to had multiple coaches. So consider that Steve Spurrier, we've got to go back to the old ball coach in 2001. So that was his final year at Florida, going a fine 10-2 and 6-2 in the SEC. And then Ron Zook took over from 2002, 3, and 4. Then it was the Urban Meyer era and the peak of Florida football right there with 2 national championships in 3 years. Then Will Muschamp, his one big season in 2012, but otherwise he bottomed out, as well as Jim McElwain limping to a couple division championships, but underachieving for Florida football. All right, the Florida recruiting rankings under Ron Zook were number 10, number 1, and number 5 in the nation. Under Urban Meyer in producing those national championship teams, number 12, 2, 1, 5, 7, and 1. So 2 number 1 recruiting classes and a couple others in the top 5 in the nation. Again, under Urban Meyer, number 12, 2, 1, 5, 7, and 1. Under Will Muschamp, that would be a number 11 class, 3, 3, and 9. So Will Muschamp recruited extremely well. 4 classes in the top 11. And then Jim McElwain at number 21 in his one season, being compared to Mark Richt in 2015, number 21, Florida's recruiting class in 2015. So the average Florida recruiting class in that time span from 2002 through 15 was number 6.5 in the nation. Of course, Georgia at 7.6. Now Tennessee, and you talk about an uneven recruiting effort under 4 football coaches for Tennessee. Of course, Philip Fulmer was finishing up his run at Tennessee, which produced a national championship in 1998. So starting in 2002, Phil Fulmer's recruiting classes at Tennessee, number 3, 10, 11, 4. Very strong. 3, 10, 11, and 4. Then number 29, and then 4. And then he finished off at number 33 in the nation. So 2 of Phil Fulmer's final 3 recruiting classes at Tennessee were pretty rough at 29th and 33rd in the country. But other than that, all top 10 classes for Phil Fulmer. Lane Kiffin recruited 1 recruiting class, and they finished 8th in the country. Then Derek Dooley, despite just crashing and burning Tennessee football on the field at 4-19 in the SEC, Derek Dooley's 3 recruiting classes in Knoxville finished number 7, 14, and 19. So the teams on the field should have been much more competitive. Then Butch Jones took over in 2013, so we'll measure his classes in 13, 14, and 15 at number 25, and then those 2 stellar classes, number 7 and number 4, but a lot of those 4 and 5-star kids did not stick around. So Tennessee, kind of on the weakness of the 3 subpar recruiting classes at number 29, 33, and 25, spread out between Fulmer, Dooley, and Jones, dips them to a 12.7 overall recruiting ranking during those 14 recruiting cycles. Still an excellent recruiting run for Tennessee football, despite it being one of the worst periods of Tennessee football that we've seen. 12.7, the average recruiting class for Tennessee from 2002 through 15 versus Mark Richt. Okay, let's look at the on-the-field performance. Under Mark Richt, Georgia won 145 games. They lost 51. And you see the winning percentage below me. In the SEC, Mark Richt went 83-37. He won no national championships in 15 seasons. Of course, he came awfully close a few times. Had a stellar team in 2002. The 2007 team did not win the SEC championship, but by season's end, many felt that that team was the best team in college football and finished in the top 5 in the nation. Then, of course, the brutal, frustrating close to the 2012 season, coming within either 1 play or 1 tick or 4 yards from defeating Alabama, which annihilated Notre Dame in the BCS championship game. And most likely Georgia would have done the same against Notre Dame. So Mark Richt's tenure at Georgia in 15 seasons, no national championships, 2 SEC championships, and 4 trips to the SEC championship game. All right. Mark Richt in 15 seasons finished ranked 12 times, 12 top 25 finishes in 15 years, 8 times in the top 10, and 3 times in the top 5. His average ranking, 16.5, and again, that even seems a bit low when you consider 8 teams out of 15 seasons. 8 of 15 finished in the top 10. All right, at Florida, under Spurrier, Zook, Meyer, and then, of course, Muschamp and McElwain, Florida football at 136-56. So that is 5 more losses than Mark Richt, and it's 9 fewer wins. So Florida football overall not achieving the consistent success Mark Richt's teams enjoyed in 15 years at Georgia. But, of course, Florida football peaked under Urban Meyer in winning 2 national championships in 3 years. So there were more peaks and valleys for Florida football, of course, with Urban Meyer. And then 7-5, 8-5 seasons with Ron Zook, and then a really good season, a top 10 season with Will Muschamp. But then, other than that, bad seasons under Muschamp, and marginal seasons under Jim McElwain, as Florida finished 82-38 in the SEC. So that's only one game worse than Mark Richt, 82-38 in those 15 seasons. All right, their ranking, Florida football in those 15 years finished ranked in the top 25 11 of 15 seasons, 5 times in the top 10, and 4 times in the top 5. Those were 3 times under Urban Meyer and 1 time under Steve Spurrier in the top 5. Florida won 2 national championships. They won the SEC 3 times. They won the division 4 times. And the one time they won the division and did not win the SEC was, of course, when Alabama won the national championship, and Florida still finished in the top 3 in the country at 13-1. Florida's average rank, you talk about up and down and up and down, 27.3. All right, with all those 4-7, 4-8 type seasons that they had near the end. All right, Tennessee football under Phil Fulmer, under Derek Dooley, Lane Kiffin, and Butch Jones went 112-78. So that's quite a bit ways behind Mark Richt's performance at Georgia. 112-78. That is 27 more losses, and that is 43 less wins than Mark Richt. Tennessee finished just 61-59 in the SEC, just 2 games over 500 in the SEC. The reason we're comparing Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee is because they're clearly the blue bloods of the SEC Eastern Division traditionally and in modern times. And when Mark Richt took over at Georgia, Tennessee was one of the standards, not just in the SEC East or the SEC, but in college football, having just won a national championship in 1998 and coming awfully close to getting back to another national championship game in 2001 before losing to LSU and Nick Saban in the SEC title game. So in those 15 years, Tennessee finished ranked 6 times in the top 25 and just 1 time in the top 10, and that was also in the top 5 under Philip Fulmer. They went to the SEC championship game 3 times. They lost all 3 games, so no national championships after the 1998 BCS championship under Philip Fulmer, 0 during the Mark Richt tenure at Georgia for Tennessee, no SEC championships, and 3 SEC Eastern Division championships. So this is what it comes out to, is that for Tennessee, they had a very strong football program, one of the 10 best football programs in the country when Mark Richt took over at Georgia. And Philip Fulmer let it deteriorate. He had some subpar recruiting classes, 2 in fact, but otherwise he recruited extremely well and continued to. But the program deteriorated into a top 15 to top 25 type program. And then Lane Kiffin came in. Obviously, he scooted out of town, as he typically does after one season, and that left Tennessee football in a bind. Derek Dooley underachieved, probably turned in one of the worst coaching performances in the history of SEC football, and then Butch Jones was not able to recover it. He did find some hope there in 2015 and 16, finishing 9-4 and 9-4. And his recruiting classes were strong, but he couldn't sustain it. And there you have it for Tennessee football. Just didn't win championships and didn't maintain the early success of Philip Fulmer. Okay, for Florida, they were winding up a golden era of Gator football under Steve Spurrier in 2001, and he finished out with a fine season that year at 10-2, top 5 in the country. Then Ron Zook came in, and they didn't implode, but they didn't play well. They didn't play up to standard, and he was losing 5 games a year. In steps Urban Meyer. He instantly rights the ship. They instantly finish in the top 10 his first year, win a national championship his second year, have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in 2007, win another national championship, finish in the top 3 in the nation again in 2009. So a great run, of course, under Urban Meyer in 6 seasons. Will Muschamp had the one big season in 2012, although it ended with a thud in New Orleans at the Sugar Bowl in 2012 against Teddy Bridgewater and Louisville. Otherwise, Will Muschamp, aside from that 11-2 campaign, did not play well, did not perform well, despite 3 strong recruiting classes under Will Muschamp. Again, at numbers 11, 3, 3, and 9 in the nation. And then Jim McElwain, despite 2 SEC Eastern Division championships in which Mark Richt should have taken advantage of having the best team and the best program in the division at the time, but allowed McElwain and also Gary Pinkel at Mizzou to win SEC Eastern Division championships. Mark Richt, extremely consistent in running the Georgia football program, bringing in top 10 recruiting classes and transforming them into generally top 10 to 15 programs and teams year after year after year after year. Consistent winning out of Mark Richt, but not those peaks that you need to cement yourself as a legend, a mainstay, and marking your ground as one of the great coaches in program history. Mark Richt is one of the best winners in Georgia history, but does not have the national championship and really lacks SEC championships with only 2 in 15 years. So there you have it. Mark Richt's tenure at Georgia versus Florida and Tennessee. SEC fans, I want to hear from you, and of course, Georgia fans in particular, on our subject here as we look at recruiting rankings versus results. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Share the videos out on social media. Subscribe to the channel, of course, to catch the best discussion, debate, and analysis right here on college football. We'll see you next time.